I'm telling you stories from the early 80s going into the mid 80s, right? And then look at so then we incarcerated for all them years, but then look at everything else that was still transpiring after that. So, yeah, it's all this is generational. Whether or not it's carrying over from any particular situation, I don't know. I can't attest to that. But I do know that each generation of new up and coming dudes, bro, make their bones however they make their bones. That's the best way I can put it. You know what I mean? Dudes make their bones, because my generation would have been the me and the dudes like the T-Los and the Loves and all them, Marcy's and the Sharpoos and the Ramutes and all them from Tonkins and the Killer Bands and the J-Rocks and all them down in the Fort Greene and the Flatbush Cats and the Brownsville Cats that was putting on Luke and Pipe and all them dudes that was putting on. This is all the same. This is all around the same time. So think about, all you got to do, bro, is Google the murder rate for Brooklyn back in the 80s. And the Jamaicans was out there from Jamaica running crazy. So it was the Wild West, bro. You couldn't go, if you went anywhere without that joint, bro, you was playing yourself at the time when it was up and active, bro, because it was dudes from every part of Brooklyn looking to put on. LG, you know what I mean? You had the Nuts and the Worlds and the Bars and the Pudges and all them dudes and all the other dudes that, you know what I mean, that was with them, that was putting on. Dudes was putting on in every hood, bro. In Brooklyn, dudes was putting on. And a lot of times dudes clash. But see, so, and like I told you at one point, the moral of all of this would have been, think of how powerful of just not even a borough, but just think of how powerful all of that entity would have been if it would have been able to be united, bro. So this is what happens. Dudes tend to link up and unite behind the wall. So all of the dudes that, not all of them, but a dudes that was having problems with each other in Brooklyn and all that, putting in pain, and they kind of linked up behind the wall. Like I told you before, at one point, Killer Ben and all them, and J-Rock and all them, and Juju and all them, those wasn't, you know, we didn't start off as homies, because we from different parts and sections of Brooklyn, and we was putting on respectively for our section. So at times it wasn't always gravy, but when we got behind the wall, all of that went out the window. You know what I mean? And we linked up. And my thing was like, damn. So what I took from a lot of that shit is that, okay, it took incarceration to enlighten a lot of individuals to say, damn, bro, we could have got major money together. We could have took over a lot of shit and did shit the right way if we would have organized. Like, I guess, like, you know, with them BMF dudes, how they had it, they had a nice run with a nice incorporation of a lot of different areas, bro. Because I guess, you know, somebody had the mindset of unification over individualization. You know what I mean? In Brooklyn, you had a lot of individual up and coming dudes, you know, looking for that stardom and looking to be put on and have their name resonate in you know, as work putters, dudes that put work in. But damn, bro, imagine when I sit back and I think, imagine what we could have did with a unification of some of all of those heavy hitters. Some that were even mentioned in some of the stories that's on your channel, bro. Imagine if some of them dudes and all of them boroughs would have been able, all of them sections would have been able to get together. Bed-Stuy, uniting with Crown Heights, uniting with East New York, uniting with Brownsville, uniting with Flatbush. You know what that would have looked like, homie? Yep. You know what that would have looked like? That would have looked like before the guns came into play, when in the early 81, 87 now, when dudes was putting on in the city, running in stores and robbing stores and snatching pockets. That's how deep it used to be. But guns changed a lot of things because the guns bring, with guns came feelings of power, bro. Because the gun situation, that's how, that's how the United States was kind of able to be formed into the States because motherfuckers, them settlers came over with them ratchets. You know what I mean? Plucking shit.
Mm-hmm.
Plucking shit. That changes the game, bro. You got a rock or a knife or a bow and arrow or a spear versus a blicky. You already know what's going to win. So he who had the blickies had the power. So, all that shit just in just retrospective, food for thought, man. When I sit back and I analyze some of the things and I say, damn, man, a lot of mistakes were made because we can't be corrected. Errors, we can correct some of those, but a lot of mistakes were made in terms of dudes not having the information, bro. Because I always say information is power, knowledge is powerful, having knowledge is a powerful thing, bro. Having information is a powerful thing because it enables you to see things in a different light. Imagine the political type of power or any type of reckoning force those heavy hitters would have been able to become if they would have had somebody that was able to unify all of that. The father tried to do it when he brought the lesson to the downtrodden and to the hoods, in the cities. He tried, but I peeped your joint you put up, guards or guns. That was insightful because that was the era that I was living. And that was fact. We got the knowledge of self and the history, and we was learning about what was right and exact and what was right and wrong and all that. At the same time, we was making our bones, homie. So those was heavy choices back then. You want to be the person with the information and the knowledge with no respect, or you want to be the person with the gun taking the respect and getting to the bag. So, those is like, in the long run, it would have been more beneficial to be the person with the information to be, to use that information in powerful ways to change shit and bring about something better for the people. But, bro, you're held responsible for what you know, bro. And what we knew back then was put on, bro. What we knew back then was putting on and violence. That's why I'm continuing to give you these stories continuously so that you can just break it up and segment it however you want. But the reality is, if we start to the beginning of where my gangster came from and where I started realizing what a gangster was and all that would have been when I was 7 years old going to see my uncle. You know what I mean? My uncle, that was a major influence in my life, that played the role of like my big brother and my pops. You know what I mean? He went to jail for a man down when I was 7. And my uncle was the youngest of my mom's siblings. It was my mom's, it was my mother's older brother. Then it was my mother. Then it was my mother's older brother. Then she had an older sister. Then it was my mother. Then she had 2 younger brothers. And then the youngest one of them, his name, my grandmother's last son, his name was Kenny Gilmore. His name is, he's still alive. His name is Kenny Gilmore. And Kenny Gilmore is my uncle. So, that's my mother's baby brother. So he went to jail in the 70s or whatever, when I was 7 years old. And my mother and my grandmother, which is his mother, used to take us to prison to see him. When he went up north and all that. I remember going to see him when I was 6 or 7 years old in Comstock and Attica and Clinton on the family days. It was all different. So I got my education and my schooling to game started from around the age of 7 when I was going to, see my uncle in jail. So that's how I believe that I was a little bit more advanced than my peers. So the dudes in my age group, like that was exactly the same age with me, they necessarily weren't on my level because I was getting schooled from an old timer that was heavy in the game. Like if you Google Kenny Gilmore, do some research, some stories about Kenny Gilmore, you'll hear what type of individual he was and what type of player he was, you know, with respect to the street shit, reputation-wise and all that. And this was the man that was schooling me since the age of 7. So it's like I had a cheat code, man. You know what I mean? I had a cheat code. At 7 years old, I had an official murderer schooling me to the game. From 7 on up to when I eventually ran into my uncle in prison. And he continued to, you know, take me under the wing and school me to a lot of things that I was unaware of. But that put me, I believe, in an advantageous position over a lot of my peers because I was getting the game from 7, not just the hustler game. I wasn't getting the hustling game. I was getting the put the work in game. You know what I mean? Since 7, going to them penitentiaries, and I got a joint. I'm gonna send you a reflection because to me, when I look back on it, and I really believe, I say, damn, I think my life started changing. And I don't know if it's for the better or for the worse, but I know it started changing when I started going into the prison system up north in the states of New York to visit my uncle, bro. And when I was doing my stints and all that, and all that, in my recent situation I had like 5, 6, 7 years ago, my thing was I wouldn't let my kids come to see me, bro, because of my memories of how I changed when I started going. So when I started going to the prison to see my uncle, I believe, right, in hindsight, when I look back at those periods of time, I believe that me visiting prison at an early age like that, it desensitized me to it, bro. And then it took away the fear that I might have of it because I had somebody that was heavy into it and his peers schooling me every time I went to see them on picnics and festivals. I'm talking about hours. You know, them up north visits is like 5, 6, 7 hours. So that's a lot of time to have a kid's attention, a 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old attention, and to be drilling information in their heads, bro. So that's why I feel like at some point, me and my team of individuals, we was destined, I don't know, it seemed like it was already in the cards for us to go to prison because I was already visiting fucking prisons since I was 7 years old. Now, was that the right thing to do? Should my whole earth, my grandma's, should they have been taking me with them? I guess she didn't have a babysitter. She wanted to see a brother. We going along for the ride. Load up, we out. But so that's something to think about too. You know what I mean? You know, there's a lot of cats behind the walls that, you know, that be loving to see their children and all that. But I don't think at times dudes analyze the possible adverse effects that's going to have on a child's mind, bro. Going in, seeing that, having to go through the search portions and seeing big, intimidating looking guards and bro.
Yeah, you normalize that shit, man. My moms used to have me. My step-pops used to be in Brooklyn House every summer. I damn near lived in Brooklyn House, going up there for the visit. Like that shit, you normalize that shit to a child. Like, yo, it ain't nothing. It's something men go through. They go to jail every once in a while.
And I think that's the wrong normalization picture, homie.
It sure is.
I truly believe that's the wrong picture. I mean, listen, it's a part of life. It's a part of our life. It's a part of our history in this country with respect to incarceration and getting incarcerated and things of that nature. But so, you know, to say good, bad, I don't know, man. That I'm gonna leave that up to the debaters. That's up for debate, whatever.
Yeah, that shit. I mean, you know, people want to see their kids, but it does do something to a child to be, you know, see their father locked up all the time for years. You growing, like, you know, it's hard to raise a kid on the visiting floor, man. It's hard, man. But dudes want to see their kids. I understand that, and kids want to see their fathers. But, you know, you got to teach your kids, like, look, I don't never want to see you up in here.
And see, that's a whole fact. Like I said, bro, it for me, I can only speak for myself, man. It desensitized me to prison. So to me, it was like prison was normal because it was like a normal rite of passage in my mind because that was what I knew from the age of 7. So I'm like, all right, in order to be a man, you got to go to prison. Because I told you at one point, in one of the conversations we had, bro, we used to, when we was coming up making our balls and doing our thing, we used to sit in the projects on the bench, about 30, 40, 50 of us deep, talking about how we was going to go to jail and run the jails. All of the stories we heard about Rikers Island, the cutting and the slashing and the stabbings and the assaults and all that, we said we couldn't wait to go. We couldn't wait to go to jail, guys. Now, how sick is that? What type of mentality is that? Like, what type of environment was we coming up in? So that's why it's important for you to bring some of these stories to life, bro, and to tell of the trials and tribulations and the mentality of individuals so that when they hear this, you're like, damn, bro, it was really like that. It was really, really like that. And not to say no particular era is whatever, but from looking at things, bro, I don't think there was ever an era like the era of the 80s, bro. Because, they got up on crime and they started minimizing shit. The 90s was wild too, but them 80s and early 90s, bro, was I think the pinnacle of what it was going to be in terms of the level of violence and what cats was doing, bro. Not just in Brooklyn, everywhere. Not just in New York, everywhere, bro. I'm talking everywhere. It was up.
Yeah, the whole world changed in the 80s, man.
You know why? You know why too, bro? Because think. You watch. I don't know if you watch, but I'm saying I watch Snowfall, right? And I watch Snowfall from a historical aspect, not just of the action and the entertainment and reliving. Oh yeah, we used to do that, whatever. But nah, the historical aspect of it is accurate in terms of how drugs was introduced into our areas in the 80s. So now you got to do the history of it, last. The 80s was the tail end of the 70s and the 60s. The 60s and 70s was still the revolution time, homie. The Black Panthers and everything, the Panther parties. So we had a lot of black leaders that, was teaching the youth about themselves and was radicalizing us to the point where, we was demanding our respect. All right, yeah, y'all have slaves and enslaved and brought us over here and chattel slavery and all that. But fuck all that, bro. The 70s and the 80s, men would have never been slaves. You'd have had to kill all of us. There would have been a lot of Nat Turners. Nothing but Nat Turners in my era, bro. We wasn't having that. So that came from so now you have to think of the power structure. Like, damn, how do we minimize all of that radicalism that's taking place in these black communities? The drugs, homie, is how they did it. They pushed the drugs and infiltrated our neighborhood with the drugs, and so the purpose of them doing that through my studies was to weaken us, right? But what they didn't count on, what we discussed before, was the resiliency and the bounce back of our people. Yeah, mad zombies was running around in the 80s, crackheads and all that. But dudes was like, wait a minute, we could capitalize off of this shit and get some money. So a lot of times when people in power or whoever does all of that shit with the idea of it being destructive, we kind of somehow turn it around. It's still destructive, right? But we still know how to make, something out of some feces, some shit, you know what I mean? We that's just the resiliency of our people, bro. Coming from the struggle, we know how to make better of a worse situation. And it was really bad, homie, because look how they hit us. The drugs and then the guns. the drugs and the guns were prevalent at the same time, homie. If you think back to when the 80, 85, 86, or whatever, when the crack when it was coming out, the guns became extremely accessible around that same time too. Because if you remember my story, I told you it was about the fist fights at first. The fist fights, the razors, and the knives. And the guns mysteriously came. So we automatically transitioned to those because we was already playing with weapons, with the razors, the knives, and the broken bottles, and bats and chains and all that. So a gun, when it came accessible, was a easy transition to make. You see what I'm saying? But that was all a design fucking structure, bro. The guns and the drugs, same time, let them kill each other, let them get addicted to it, weaken them. Because the radicalism, we was on the verge, I think back then, of a lot of civil unrest and revolutions because of the enlightenment that we was having. So I guess they figured if they, put us in a state of euphoria, being high and under the influence, we would no longer think in terms of radicalized armed warfare.
Hey yo, LAC, subscribe to this Genpop TV channel, you heard, where you gonna have this extra commentary and segments of us building, you heard, with various brothers that tell stories on the channel, you feel me? Because it's not always a story or a tale or an action-packed tale. Sometimes we on here just building about life, about the community, about society and the hood, you feel me? And there's a lot of information that you could get from this, you heard? So make sure you subscribe to that Genpop TV channel. Yersk, Z-Lord.